There's a mirror trick in Japan. You stand in front of a mirror, you look back over your left shoulder and turn just a little too far. Then you angle your head and check the right side of the glass. Supposedly, if there's anything around you, you'll see it there. It notices you. That night, alone in my apartment, I tried it. My neck started to hurt, my ears filled with the sound of my own breathing, the room tilted sideways. I forced my eyes toward the right side of the mirror, and something was there, in the mirror. It happened to a friend of mine who went to Japan after COVID. We'd been close when we were kids. She used to laugh at ghost stories and thought they were fun as long as they happened to other people. Years later, when she finally told me what happened, she was a completely different person. Her hands were on the table, fingers locked together so they wouldn't shake. Every now and then she'd rub her neck, like she didn't even realize she was doing it. I'm going to tell you this story the way she told me. Back then I was 21 and thought I was an adult. I had just entered my 4th year in uni and landed my first internship in Japan. It wasn't Tokyo or anything glamorous, more like a mid-sized city you pass through on the way to somewhere more important. The company was small. We shared one floor of an old office building. The walls were so thin you could hear someone stirring sugar 3 desks away. Japanese office culture hit me like a truck. The idea was simple. No one leaves before the boss. If the section chief was still browsing news at 9:30, you stayed, pretending to be productive. By the time I dragged myself back to my apartment, the last train had already emptied the station, and the streets were dead. The only reason that life was bearable was the people, especially one girl. I called her Ray. She was from Osaki, pale, quiet but confident. She worked part-time in the same office, helped me when I got stuck on obscure forms. Her Japanese was perfect. Mine was still clumsy. She had a way of talking that made you feel like you were being let in on a secret. She loved the occult. You know the type. She'd collect urban legends, the way other people collect baseball cards. If you do this at 3 a.m., a ghost will appear. If you go to this tunnel, you'll hear a woman crying. She said it half-jokingly, but never completely laughed. Most of those stories are fake, she said once, as we smoked outside under the sodium lights. But not all of them. Sometimes, if the conditions are right. She didn't finish the sentence. She just smiled and flicked ash into the gutter. I thought it was just talk. It was something to pass time, between overtime and the last train. I didn't realize how much those conditions had to do with me being young, exhausted, and unbelievably stupid. In August, the heat clung to everything. The office air conditioner groaned. It barely cooled the room. One weekend, Ray suggested we visit a famous spirit spot. "It'll be fun," she said. "We'll bring 2 girls from accounting. Team building, but haunted." She said it lightly, like the word haunted was just seasoning. We drove out of the city until buildings thinned into rice fields and dark hills. The road had been abandoned after a new tunnel was built. Online, people mentioned white hands grabbing ankles. When we arrived, it felt more sad than scary. Tree branches pushed through broken guardrails. A rusted roadside mirror stood at the bend, half shattered. It reflected 3 faint orange moons behind us. "Do people really see things here?" one of the girls asked, hugging her bag to her chest. "Sometimes," Ray said, "but it's not guaranteed. Ghosts aren't vending machines." We walked a bit, laughed more than we needed to. The only strange thing was an old roadside shrine, really just a stone box with a tiny roof, half collapsed. Its offering bowl filled with rainwater and dead leaves. Nothing happened. If the story had ended there, I'd be a happier person. 3 days later, I did something that changed the entire trajectory of my life. It was a weekday, after another pointless stretch of overtime. My eyes were so dry I could hear my own pulses in them. The train was crowded at first, then emptied as we left the city centre, neon giving way to darkness and scattered houses. My apartment was a one-room box with a futon, a low table, and a full-length mirror I'd bought second-hand. The mirror leaned against the wall opposite the balcony door. Sometimes I'd catch myself in it late at night and almost not recognise my own reflection. That night, I dropped my bag, loosened my hair tie, and just stood there for a while, swaying a little from tiredness. The room smelled faintly of instant noodles and detergent. Outside, the cicadas screamed like they were trying to peel the sky open. And then I remembered something Ray had said. We'd been at lunch one day, and the topic was, of course, ghosts. She mentioned this old trick. You stand in front of a mirror, she said. Look over your left shoulder, turn a little far, then check the right side of the glass. If there's anything around you, you'll see it there. What happens if you see something? I asked. She shrugged. Worst case? It notices you. We laughed, that was all. Just another lunch conversation between half-asleep co-workers. But that night, in my empty room, the memory came back with ridiculous clarity. I stood in front of the mirror, toes on the worn patch of tatami, my top crooked. In what universe would anything actually appear? I muttered. Still, my eyes found my shoulders, my knees locked. I turned until my neck burned. Blood rushed to my head, my ears filled with my own breathing. The room tilted. I forced myself a little farther, angling toward the right side of the mirror. And something was there. At first, my brain refused to process it. My shoulders framed the edges of the world, and in the centre of the glass, where my torso should have been, something else was standing. It didn't look human, not distorted, not shadowed, just not human. Its hair was the first thing I saw, long withered strands hanging in thick ropes like hemp left too long in the rain. It covered where a face should have been. And then I realised there were no eyes, no mouth, just layers of yellowed paper, talismans stuck to its skin, overlapping, peeling at the corners, smeared dark in places, like something underneath had tried to push through. It wore a loose white kimono, the kind used to dress the dead. It was swaying, slow at first, back and forth, but the longer I stared, the more the rhythm felt wrong, too steady, too patient, like it had been waiting. This isn't possible. That thought hit me late, and when it did, my body reacted before my mind caught up. I jerked backward, nearly falling. Black dots swam in my vision. My hand slammed against the wall, fumbling for the light switch. I hit it. The room snapped white. The thing did not disappear. If anything, the light made it clearer. It stood in the centre of the mirror, exactly where I had been, still swaying, still wrapped in paper, still dressed in burial white. And it was glowing. Not bright, not cinematic, just a faint, pale haze, like it was lit from within by the memory of electricity. The glow stayed inside the rectangle of the mirror. Everything outside it was dead still. My curtain, my table, the crumpled shirt over the chair. They belonged to my life. The thing in the mirror did not. I don't know how long we stood there, me pressed against the wall, hand shaking. Then my body remembered panic. My other hand groped for my bag. I didn't take my eyes off the mirror, terrified that if I blinked, it would step out. My fingers caught the strap, dragged it toward me. I edged sideways along the wall toward the door. The moment I moved, it changed. The swaying stopped being slow. It jerked, sharply, closer. I heard something, not a voice, not words, wet cloth being wrung out near my ear, a sticky, pulsing sound. And then the smell hit. Damp, sweet, rotten, even though the windows were closed. I ran. I yanked the door open, nearly tearing the knob off, and ran. Down the narrow apartment hallway, stairwell flashing past in a dizzy rhythm of metal and concrete, slippers slapping against the steps. I didn't wait for the elevator. I don't remember locking the door. I don't remember breathing. The next thing I knew, I was standing under the bright, humming lights of a convenience store near the station, chest heaving, my bag cutting into my shoulder. The store clerk glanced up at me with mild annoyance and went back to stacking rice balls. It was like the world had resumed without me. I stayed there. I walked slow circles through the aisles, picking things up without seeing them. Every time I drifted near the entrance, my body refused to step outside. There was no reason to be afraid of the road home, but every time I pictured the mirror, my throat closed. I must have looked strange. It is around 3 a.m. The clerk asked politely, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I lied. "Missed my last train." He nodded like that explained everything and went back to restocking shelves. Only when the sky outside started turning a thin, dirty grey did I force myself to leave. The cicadas had stopped. Birds were starting up instead. The walk back to my apartment felt much shorter in daylight. The building looked small, ugly, harmless. Someone had left a broken umbrella in the bike rack. I stood in front of my door for a long time with the key in my hand. The metal was cold. My hand wasn't. You didn't turn off the light, I told myself. I remembered slapping the switch on. In my mind, the room was still flooded with that fluorescent glare, mirror full of something that was not me. My fingers shook as I turned the key. The door opened with its usual scrape. It was dark inside. For a second, I wondered if I had imagined everything. Maybe I'd never turned the light on at all. Maybe I'd imagined everything. Maybe I'd fallen asleep somewhere and dreamed it, with a stiff neck and a coffee stain on my shirt. Then the smell hit me. It was thick and sweet and rotten, like a pond full of dead leaves left to ferment in the sun. It rolled over me in a wave, made the spaces behind my eyes ache. I gagged and put a hand over my nose. I found the switch by memory and flicked it. The light came on. The mirror was empty. My reflection stared back at me, hair rumpled, collar crooked, face pale. For a moment, relief numbed everything else. My knees went weak. My breath came out in a short, ugly laugh. Then I looked down. On the floor in front of the mirror was a stain, black and grainy, like river mud dumped there. It glistened wetly under the light. Footprints. Too many of them, layered and overlapping, never resolving into a clear shape. The smell came from there. I stared, mind blank, then slowly became aware of my hand on the wall. My fingers were still on the light switch. Something cold and sticky slid down my wrist. The switch was smeared with the same black sludge. It clung to my skin. My fingertips were coated, the stuff glistening faintly. That was when my stomach gave up. I barely made it to the sink. No matter how much I rinsed my hands, I could still feel it there. I should have called someone. Instead, I showered until my skin burned, opened the windows, and went to work. Because that's what you do when you're 21 and more afraid of being late than being haunted. On the train, people shifted away from me. Just a little. Just enough. In the office elevator, one of the girls from accounting wrinkled her nose slightly, then immediately forced her face back into polite neutrality. In the morning meeting, when I leaned forward to adjust the projector, one of my supervisors subtly covered her nose with her hand. The smell had followed me. It clung to me like smoke after a fire. I couldn't smell it clearly anymore. Maybe my nose had given up, but I saw it in everyone else's expression. That faint discomfort they were too polite to comment on. At lunch, I grabbed Ray and dragged her to the smoking area. "I did it," I said. She lit her cigarette, half listening. "Did what?" "That mirror thing. The looking over my left shoulder thing." "That?" she laughed. "You actually tried it? Did you hurt your neck?" It appeared. She froze. The lighter burned too close to her fingers before she snapped it off. Her eyes narrowed as she looked at me properly for the first time that day. "You smell like something died," she said quietly. I told her everything, like a series of broken pieces spilling out of my mouth. The hair, the talismans, the swaying, the black sludge on the floor and the light switch on my hand. She didn't interrupt. She just smoked, face getting paler with each detail. When I finished, she stubbed out her cigarette with more force than necessary. "Okay," she said. "Okay? This is real." "I know it's real," I snapped. I'm not saying you're lying." She ran a hand through her hair, fingers trembling slightly. "Listen, I know someone, not exactly a priest, but she deals with this kind of thing. Let me talk to her. Don't go back to your apartment tonight." She didn't. I am overreacting. She didn't tease me about being scared. That scared me more than anything. That night, she came with me to my apartment. The moment I opened the door, the smell hit both of us full in the face. She recoiled like she'd been punched. "Shit," she said, pulling her sleeve up over her nose. "It's like something crawled in here and rotted for a year." We tiptoed around the black stain. The mirror showed only our reflections, pale and tight-lipped. Ray didn't stay long. "I'll call you tomorrow," she said from the doorway, already halfway turned away. "Just don't do anything else. Don't try any other rituals. If anything weird happens, call me, not some random place." "What about tonight?" I asked. My voice sounded small even to me. She hesitated. "Sleep with the lights on," she said finally. "And if you hear anything, pretend you didn't." Then she left. I locked the door, slid down to the floor, and sat there with my back against the wood until my legs went numb. The lights stayed on all night. At some point I must have slept, because I remember dreams that were more like static than images. But every time I half woke, I had the distinct sensation that something was standing at the foot of my futon, just outside the edge of my vision, watching, never moving, never touching, just there. The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. The shrines and temples in Japan are always so calm in dramas. Real life is more practical. The first shrine I went to was half under construction. The priest listened with a polite smile as I stammered some edited version of my story. "That kind of thing happens when people are tired," he said at last. "You should rest. Maybe go home for a while. We can do a small purification ritual if you like, but..." He trailed off, clearly not taking it seriously. At the next temple, an old monk patted my shoulder. "If you focus on these things, you'll only invite more. Try not to think about it." By the time I left the third place, I realised something. Either they genuinely didn't sense anything, or they didn't want to get involved. I went home and packed a bag. The bus to my uncle's town left in the late afternoon. As we left the city, the buildings thinned, replaced by fields, then low mountains. I pressed my forehead against the window, watching the light redden. My neck started to itch. At first, it was just a mild annoyance. I scratched absent-mindedly. The itch deepened, turning into heat. It felt like someone had wrapped a warm rope around my throat and was slowly tightening it. I tried to ignore it. The bus rattled. The sky went from orange to purple. By the time we pulled into the station, the itch had become a burn. Every step from the station to my uncle's house made it worse. The air felt thicker. My collar seemed too tight, cutting into the skin. I loosened it, but it didn't help. When I reached the front door, my hand shook as I slid it open. "I'm here," I called, automatically. My aunt appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on a towel. "Oh, you didn't tell us you were," she began, then her face changed. "What happened to your neck?" There's a mirror in my uncle's hallway. I'd seen it 1,000 times when I came to Japan for vacation. I turned to look. A vivid red line circled my neck. Not a scratch, not a rash. It looked exactly like the mark a rope would leave after being pulled tight around someone's throat. The skin sunken in at some points, as if the flesh had actually been compressed. My legs went weak. I don't remember much of that evening in a clear sequence. There were voices, my aunt's high and panicked, my uncle's low and trying to be calm. There was a cold towel pressed to my neck, which did nothing. There was the local clinic doctor frowning as she poked at the line, muttering something about contact dermatitis or allergic reaction. By the next day, it wasn't just a line. Clusters of raised, swollen bumps had formed along it, some on the line itself, some radiating out, like a necklace of diseased pearls. Within another day, they filled with thick, yellowish fluid and turned a sick green, like blisters made of overripe beans. They oozed. The discharge smelled faintly of the same rot from my apartment. I vomited more than once just from looking at myself in the bathroom mirror. None of the medication helped. The marks grew, merged, hardened in some places, cracked in others. My skin felt tight and hot. At night, I woke up gasping, scratching at my neck until my aunt held my hands down. "We're going to fix this," my uncle said, eyes red from lack of sleep. But every doctor appointment ended with the same helpless shrug. And in the middle of all that, Ray called. "I found someone," she said. Her voice sounded wrong over the phone, too formal, too careful. "He's not official, but he's good. He's helped with things temples won't touch." I should have hung up. Instead, I clung to the phone like it was a lifeline. A few days later, Mr. V arrived. He didn't look like a priest. Gold chain, shirt open too far, hair slicked back. His eyes kept moving. "I hear you've got yourself into some trouble," he said, smiling. His Japanese had a faint accent I couldn't place. He listened as I told him the story again. This time I left nothing out. When I mentioned the black sludge, his smile faded for the first time. "That'll do it," he murmured. "You've brought something home that doesn't belong here." He named a price. It started at 500,000 yen. My uncle and aunt looked at each other, then at my neck. I saw the calculation happen in my uncle's eyes. Savings, retirement, everything they'd planned being rearranged. Before they could even fully agree, the amount had somehow risen to 2 million. "It's not easy work," Mr. V said. "If this were a simple wandering spirit, it would be cheaper. But this one is old. Desperation drowns out common sense." My uncle and aunt agreed. The ritual took place in my old bedroom. He made my uncle and aunt wait in the car outside, insisting that if they stayed, the spirit might move to them. That thought alone was enough to send my aunt out the door, clutching her purse like a shield. Inside, he set everything up with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done these many times. Candles burned in the corners, talismans lined the walls. A small table held sake and salt. "Lie down," he told me. I lay on my back on the futon, staring up at the familiar ceiling. The glow of the candles painted wavering patterns across it. The room smelled of wax and cheap incense. "Close your eyes," he said. He started to chant. The words were a slurry of different phrases, snatches of sutras, bits of something that sounded like a different language altogether, my name thrown in every once in a while. I felt the splash of cold liquid on my face and chest as he flicked sake from the cup toward me. "Don't open your eyes," he warned, "no matter what you hear." That's the thing about telling someone not to do something. It plants the idea like a seed. At first, all I heard was his voice and the soft crackle of candle wicks. Then, slowly, another sound slid in underneath. A wet, rhythmic whisper, like someone dragging a damp rag across the floor in tiny jerks. My neck began to burn again. The air in the room thickened. I felt it pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The chanting wavered, the rhythm breaking apart. I opened my eyes. Mr. V was sitting on the edge of the futon, facing me. His posture was rigid, shoulders hunched, hands resting on his knees. His mouth was open just a little, as if mid-word. His eyes weren't looking at me. They were looking past me. No, through me. I shifted my gaze. It was sitting directly across from him. The same thing I had seen in the mirror was now barely an arm's length from Mr. V. Its entire body leaned in toward him. From where I lay, I could see only the profile of its head, the edge of paper layers, the strings of hair hanging down like rotten seaweed. Its neck moved in tiny, jerky motions, almost like a bird's, twitching closer and closer to his face. Talismans trembled with each not word. It was like listening to water boil in reverse, bubbles drawing in instead of out. Mr. V's face had gone slack. Her eyes were wide, pupils huge, staring at something I couldn't see. A thin line of drool was running from the corner of his mouth, down his chin, dripping onto his shirt. The expression on his face was impossible to read, somewhere between a grin and a grimace. The thing's head twitched. Very slowly, as if following a smell, it turned. The paper-covered face tilted toward me. In that moment, I knew with a certainty that if I let it finish that turn, something would cross a line that couldn't be undone. I shut my eyes. The air shifted. There was a scraping sound, like a chair being kicked back. A choked curse in a voice that was suddenly very human. Footsteps, fast, clumsy, crossing the room. Something knocked over. A candle, maybe. The door slammed open so hard it rattled against the wall. Then the thunder of someone running down the stairs. The front door. My aunt's scream. My uncle shouting her name. The engine of a car roaring to life and tearing away down the street. And then, silence. I lay there with my eyes screwed shut, fists clenched, nails biting into my palms. The room felt heavier, but there was no sound. The angry heat around my neck simmered. At some point, maybe minutes later, maybe an hour, my uncle opened the bedroom door again, voice shaking. "Is it over?" he asked. Mr. V never came back. Never returned our calls, never returned the money. Whatever was in that room with us, it had been enough to make a man who claimed to deal with spirits professionally drop everything, and run. That was when my uncle and aunt realised this had gone beyond anything they could handle on their own. My grandmother was the one who provided the last desperate option. On the phone, her voice crackled with age and distance. "There's a temple in Kunisaki," she said, "halfway up a mountain. I went there once when I was younger. The master there, he sees things other people don't. If anyone can help, it's him." My parents took a leave from work and flew to Japan to be with us. We loaded into the car, me in the back, neck itching under a scarf even in the heat, my mother clutching a bag full of medicine that didn't work, my father gripping the wheel like it was the only solid thing in the world. My uncle and aunt were tired and slouched in the seats. The drive was long. The landscape slid from urban sprawl to hills, then to the kind of soft, layered mountains that look like faded paintings at dusk. By the time we reached Kunisaki, my neck felt like it had grown its own heartbeat. The temple road wound upward in tight curves. Trees leaned over the asphalt, branches touching above like fingers. The air cooled as we climbed. Somewhere along the way, the sounds of the city dropped away, replaced by cicadas and the distant rush of a stream. The temple itself was smaller than I'd imagined. Not some grand complex with towering gates, but a modest wooden building that looked like it had grown out of the mountain. Moss clothed the stone lanterns along the path. Wind chimes made of glass and metal hung from the eaves, tinkling softly. The moment I stepped through the gate, something eased. Just a little. The burn around my neck dropped from a roar to a low, steady throb. The air felt lighter, easier to breathe. A monk in simple robes greeted us and led us into the main hall. The smell of incense was there, but it wasn't thick or cloying. It felt clean. The master was not what I expected. He was small and thin, an old man whose skin had the delicate wrinkles of paper that's been folded many times. His head was shaved clean. His eyes were sharp in a way that made you feel seen. He listened as my parents explained, then held up a hand gently. "Let me speak to her alone," he said, nodding toward me. My mother hesitated. "But I will not harm her," the master said. "If there is anything here that can harm her, it is already with her. Sitting in the next room will not change that." Reluctantly, they withdrew. The hall grew quiet. The master motioned for me to sit on a cushion facing him. The tatami under my knees smelled faintly of straw and thyme. Behind him, a statue of a bodhisattva looked down with a calm, unreadable expression. Behind him, a statue of a bodhisattva looked down with a calm, unreadable expression. We sat like that for a while, her watching me trying not to squirm. "Are you afraid?" he asked at last. It was such a simple question that I almost laughed. Instead, my throat tightened. "Yes," I said. My voice cracked on the word. "What are you afraid of?" he asked. "What it is," I said. "Why it's following me. Why this happened. I didn't do anything wrong." As soon as I said it, something in the air to my left shifted. The sound came first, that same wet whisper I'd heard in my bedroom, slow, rhythmic, like the sound of someone bowing over and over with damp cloth brushing the floor. I turned my head. It was there. No mirror, no trick of reflections, just there, beside me, as plainly as the master sitting across from me. It was bowing. Its long hair swung forward and back with each motion, talismans trembling on its face. The white kimono sleeves slid along a tatami, leaving no mark. Each bow brought its head closer to mine, until the top of that paper-covered skull was only inches away from my cheek. Up close, the talismans were more detailed than I'd remembered. Some had faint, faded writing on them, characters half worn away, ink spread by moisture. Others were blank, edges curled. A few had dark stains that had dried into them, almost the colour of old rust. It began to straighten. Very slowly, in a series of stiff, jerky movements, it raised its head. My eyes followed, trapped. My body felt nailed in place. The air thickened until it felt like I was breathing through wet cloth. Its hands, pale, thin, fingers too long, rose toward its face. One by one, it started peeling the talismans off. They came away with a soft, sticky sound, like tape from skin. Edges curled up. Yellow paper fell in slow motion. Underneath, something darker waited. In that moment, every nerve in my body screamed, "Don't." If I saw its face, its real face, the thing under the paper, something would break in a way that could never be fixed. I knew that with the same certainty you know that touching fire will burn. I couldn't move. My heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to escape. My vision narrowed until there was nothing but those rising hands and the layers of paper coming away. And then the master did something I will never forget. He shouted. It wasn't a word in any language I knew. It was more like a sound that had teeth. At the same time, his hand slammed down on the wooden floor in front of him. The crack of skin on wood was so loud it felt physical, like a wave. The world jolted. The thing beside me vanished. Not faded, not dissolved. It was simply there 1 second and gone the next, leaving a small impression in the air, like the echo of a smell. I realized I'd been holding my breath. It rushed out of me in a ragged gasp. My whole body shook. The master was watching me. His expression hadn't changed much, but there was a barely visible tension in his shoulders, like someone who had just caught a falling object. "It asked you a question, didn't it?" he said quietly. I swallowed. My throat felt raw. "Why?" I whispered. "That's all. It just kept saying why." I hadn't realized until he said it that I had understood those whispers somewhere under the sound, not in words, but in intent. "And what is so frightening about that?" the master asked. "It's a monster," I said. My voice shook. "It made my neck like this. It followed me. It... I broke off, out of breath. He shook his head slowly. "I do not feel malice from it," he said. "Pain, perhaps. Confusion, certainly. But no hatred. It is simply there, clinging, asking." He looked at my neck for a long time, then back at my face. "It has not harmed you as much as you think." "It appeared. It pressed against your boundary. You, in your fear, pressed back." His tone wasn't accusing. It was simply factual, like a doctor pointing out a symptom. "I will not destroy it," he continued. "That is not my place. But I can attempt to guide it away from you, to show it a path where it no longer needs to ask that question here." He rose, slow but steady. What followed wasn't some dramatic exorcism like in movies. No shouting, no flinging of charms. He lit incense, chanted sutras in a low, steady voice that sank into the floorboards in the air and, somehow, into the tight knot of fear behind my ribs. He bowed, he rang a small bell. He offered prayers, not against it, but for it. For the one who cannot rest, he said at one point. May it find understanding. May its why be answered somewhere kinder. I cried. Not big, heaving sobs, just a slow leaking of tears I couldn't stop. When it was over, the room felt different. Lighter? Not exactly. It felt like a taut wire had loosened half a turn. The burn around my neck cooled from a flame to embers. You will stay for a while, the master said. There is a larger head temple nearby. They will take you in. I stayed for a month. They gave me a simple space with a futon, a small table, and a view of the mountains. My days fell into a strange, quiet rhythm. Early morning bells, cleaning, simple meals, long stretches of time where no one expected anything from me, except to be present. At first, I kept waiting, for the whisper, for the mirror to betray me again. Nothing happened. My neck didn't heal overnight. The marks were still there, red, swollen, ugly. But they stopped getting worse. The skin began to knit, slowly, like grass growing back after a fire. The monks didn't ask for details. They knew enough. They simply included my name in their recitations, their offerings. Sometimes, wiping down the wooden corridor with a damp cloth, I'd feel a brief wave of dizziness and hear that faint, echoing "why" at the edge of hearing. Then it, too, faded. I wasn't the only one there for reasons like mine. There was a man in his 60s who had been visiting the temple off and on for 40 years. He never said exactly what he saw, but his eyes never quite focused on the present. There was a woman who had lost half her family in what she called a curse. She laughed loudly, as if daring something to return. Compared to them, I had been lucky. Mine had come early, loud enough to force me to act. By the end of the month, the lesions on my neck had turned into faint pink scars. The line of the rope mark was still visible, but softer, like an old injury. The master came to see me before I left. I believe it has gone, he said simply. Or, at least, it no longer uses you as a mirror. Gone where? I asked. He smiled slightly. That is not for us to know. Perhaps it found someone who could answer its question. Perhaps it learned there is no answer, and decided to rest anyway. He studied my face for a moment. Remember, he said, you went looking. You looked for something you did not understand. When the world answers that kind of call, it is rarely in the way you expect. I went back to my life. I returned to work at a different company in a different city. My parents tried not to look at my neck. The scar around my neck faded to a pale ring. When people asked, I said it was from a bad skin condition. They nodded and didn't pry. For a long time, I couldn't stand full-length mirrors. But mirrors are everywhere. Shops, elevators, gym locker rooms. Sometimes, catching my own reflection, my heart would stutter. My eyes would flick automatically to the right side of the glass, expecting to see a white sleeve, a sway of hair, a strip of yellow paper. I never did. Sometimes, very rarely, I feel a faint itch around my neck. Not pain, just memory. I touch it lightly and breathe. I don't say anything out loud. Are you still asking why, I sometimes think? But I don't say it out loud. I don't want to invite anything back. Years passed before she told me all of this. We were sitting in a tea shop in East Side of London, the kind with all-you-can-eat finger sandwiches and endless refills of tea. The place was crowded and loud, plates clattered. Someone at the next table was laughing too hard at something on their phone. And over all that noise, she told me this story in a low, steady voice, like she was finally emptying a drawer she hadn't opened in years. I heard once, she said, that a story like mine was told on a late-night radio show in Japan. Anonymous. Very similar details. She stirred her drink without looking at it. Maybe it was me, she said. Maybe someone passed my story along. Maybe it happened to more than one idiot who tried that mirror trick. I don't know. But every time I hear static on the radio late at night, I get this feeling. When she finished, we sat there for a while. The mirror behind the counter caught our reflections, mine, hers, the space between us. I still don't think it meant harm, she said, but I don't think it understood either. She rubbed the faint scar around her neck. I don't try things like that anymore. But that doesn't make it less terrifying. Some things in this world, they're not meant to be seen, especially not as a joke. As we left, I noticed she avoided looking directly into the shop's mirror. I did too. If you ever feel the urge in front of a mirror and look back at yourself from your left shoulder toward the right, just to see if anything's there, maybe don't.